welcome back to Haircuts and Uppercuts podcast with me, Luke, and Scott. Today we're delighted to be joined by Frank Greaves, the coach of the hottest heavyweight at the moment on the prospect scene, David Adeleye. How's things going?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Can't complain. It was short work over the weekend. There was obviously mitigating circumstances. I'm sure people are aware that our original opponent tested positive for COVID. But David still got a run out. We was fortunate enough to get a replacement in at less than 24 hours. Yeah, he still got his run out. Looked classy. I think it was a great body shot that finished the fight. And regardless of the opposition in front of him, you know, it was a good, well-picked shot. So I was happy. Would have been nicer to get a few more than 90 seconds, but you can't have everything, can you?
Don't get paid for overtime, do you?
Absolutely not.
So what's really interesting is, you know, I've done my research and looked into what you've done previously. How did you end up going from working in media and documentaries and filmmaking and producing to where you are today?
Well, it was kind of the other way around, really. Essentially, me and my little brother Johnny Greaves. I don't know if you've spoke to Johnny yet. If you haven't, you probably should, because he's rather entertaining. So basically, me and John started boxing as kids. You know, 12-year-old kids. I mean, we spent years punching lumps out of each other. We had one pair of gloves. He was a southpaw, I was orthodox, so I had the right, he had the left. Spent years punching each other up as young kids. And then we both joined the same amateur club, East Ham and Bowling, at 11, 12, 13, something like that. I didn't really do anything, mucked around with it, didn't particularly take it seriously at all. My little brother stayed with it. He had about 50-odd amateurs. It weren't bad, actually, sort of, you know, win a couple, lose one. I'm not exactly sure what his record was, but yeah, it was not bad, but he was never really dedicated, should we say. Always like puffing on a fag, even back then. So basically he stayed with it and I drifted away at like 15. You know, you sort of discover girls and pubs and clubs and whatever else. So I drifted away, and yeah, as you do. And John stayed with it. So as I say, he ended up having like 50-odd amateurs. He then boxed unlicensed. He had about 50 unlicensed as well. And then he turned pro in like 2006-ish. Anyway, first few fights, he was with Jason Rowland, ex-British light welterweight champion, decent fighter. I think he had, 10, 11 fights with Jason, and then they split for whatever reason, varying reasons. It'd be best place to tell you that. But so yeah, they split. And I started basically helping my brother out, driving him to venues, driving him to shows. He was on the road. He was an opponent, a journeyman, if you will. So yeah, I started driving him to shows. And you sit in ringside, you know, they're all early undercard type fights. Sitting ringside, and I'm listening to the advice that he's getting off of a trainer that he's just got on the show. You know, they're looking after someone else. They didn't care for him much. Anyway, I can't remember which fight it was, but I said, John, I can do a better job than that. I can look after you better than that. He said, well, go and get your license. So I went, sat the board interview, got my corner seconds license. Anyway, literally, stayed with Johnny, ended up having 100 pro fights. Got quite well known over the course of a few years. I ended up with a little stable of fighters myself. I had 7 or 8 lads that was out on the road. So pretty much week in, week out, every weekend for a few years, I was off up the country somewhere. I was, in Bolton or Liverpool or London or wherever it might be, either with 1, 2 or 3 of my fighters out, but pretty much every weekend for years. So you get to know your trade. You're taking on prospects and you're taking on all sorts of different people that you don't know anything about. You're getting there and you're working it out on the night. You learn how to deal with a crisis. You learn, it was how I learned how to do cuts, because these journeymen, they're not getting paid big money. They can't afford to take cut men. And, you end up, I'm washing the spit bucket, washing the gum shield out in the spit bucket, doing their cuts, giving them advice. You become a jack of all trades almost. So yeah, that went on for a few years. And towards the back end of my little brother's career, as I say, he became sort of notorious is not the right word, but he became quite well known on the circuit. And there was a guy that was making a film or was interested in making a film about journeymen and the other side of boxing. I don't know if you've seen it, Cornered. It was a BT Sport documentary.
Yeah.
Anyway,
to see that.
so basically, the guy that made that film, I became quite pally with. Obviously, being my little brother's trainer, I was quite heavily involved in the film. I started getting involved in the process and, you know, what it took to make a film. I started training the guy. He wanted to learn how to box and, you know, the whys and the wherefores. And we became quite friendly. So after sort of 18 months of this going on, I was moaning about the job I was doing at the time. I'm a black cab driver by trade, London taxi driver. Anyway, he just signed a big contract, big media production contract, and he offered me a job. So I basically took the plunge and went and worked for his media company. And I mean, I'm still involved in that now. And obviously, you know, I mean, there was a hell of a lot of stuff that happened in the interim period. Hello, Kat.
She always does this.
I don't want my kids to be up in a minute. There was in the interim period between like my little brother, the film was finished. I had a few fighters that retired and just, you know, sort of just by natural sort of progression, they moved away or whatever else, retired. Anyway, I ended up with no fighter. So I ended up, someone chucked a comment out there about, why don't you turn pro yourself? And my initial reaction was that it was a completely ridiculous statement. I was like 35, I think, at the time, probably about 13 and a half stone, something like that, you know, 3 stone over what would have been my fighting weight. And yeah, I went to bed that night and, you know, dismissed it after about 10 seconds. Went to bed the next night and dismissed it after about 20 seconds, and then 30 and then 40, and then ended up thinking, yeah, you know what, why not? So I basically went through the whole licensing application process, got licensed, and ended up having 4 pro fights myself back in 2015. So yeah, made my pro debut at 36. I mean, it was a kind of a box ticking exercise, but, you know, one of those what's the word, bucket list type things.
Yeah. So that wasn't the dream then at all, to become the pro boxer and have the big name or anything like that? Obviously, it started the career quite late. Yeah. I mean, I literally, for me, it was someone just said to me, look, why don't you do it? You know, I've been sparring with a lot of the lads for a long time. Nothing brutal, but obviously, you know, I'd started as a 15-year-old kid and kind of kept my hand in for a few years. So, you know, it was nothing brutal. A lot of it was technical stuff in-house between fighters. I mean, journeymen don't spar that hard anyway, just because they're out week in, week out. They don't need hard sparring. But, you know, effectively, I've been sparring with pros for 4 or 5 years and been holding my own. And as I say, it was a chuck away comment. Someone said, why don't you, you know, just before you're too old, why don't you have a couple yourself? So I did. I did that. And then basically I worked through the media all the way through it. Ended up, I work for Channel 5 now. You know, basically do all their boxing coverage. Loads of work as a cut man, go all over the world, boxing, MMA. So yeah, it was kind of really, really busy. Basically, after I finished in 2015, I ended up training Gary Corcoran, who ended up boxing for a world title in Australia against Jeff Holm, the Manny Pacquiao conqueror. So I kind of, you know, got up to that exalted level, got up to that big level, high level. And then obviously Gary lost that fight, come back, had a comeback fight, boxed Johnny Garton for the British title. And unfortunately, Gary had an injury in that fight, which basically meant that he couldn't box anymore. And I, you know, kind of put my life and soul into Gary as a fighter. He was great. You know, we had a great relationship, and I was really sort of sad to see him go. And to tell the truth, I just wanted a break. I wanted a break from boxing. I've been on the road and you know, either training fighters full time while still holding down a full time job as well. Got a young family, got married, kids. So so I basically had a break. I still did cuts work, but I didn't do any day-to-day stuff. And then literally the start of last year, I ended up I won a contract to go and be a VT producer for the West Indies Cricket Board. It's like 90 days a year in the West Indies. It was great. And then COVID sounds all right.
COVID kicked in and put paid to that. And literally during that first lockdown, I got the phone call to go and start working with David. So it was kind of fate, really, because had it hadn't been for COVID, I probably would have been in the West Indies, and I'd have said, thanks but no thanks. So yeah, basically that's cutting a very long story short into how I ended up getting the call for David. Although actually, I worked with him on his pro debut to wrap his hands up. He'd had a couple of hand injuries in his amateur career, so I got the call off of Frank Warren's team to go after his hands. I've garnered quite a reputation for being a decent hand wrapper, so I got that job, and that was basically the intro into working with David. We started doing a bit in the gym, and a pair of us hadn't looked back.
So do you think it was your vast experience in all areas, like you say, you become a jack of all trades, so to speak, is why David chose you?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, potentially. I mean, anyone really. You're coming out of the amateurs, and it's kind of a cliched, welcome to the pros, and the pros is different, but it is. I mean, it's almost like the difference between tennis and table tennis. A 3-round sprint in the amateurs is completely different to potentially building into a 12-round fighter. And realistically, you can't learn to be a 12-round fighter when you're fighting a 12-rounder for the first time. You need to start slowing yourself down and learning how to pace yourself, and learning, even when you're only fighting 4-rounders, you're almost fighting at a 12-round pace. A little bit quicker, obviously, because you want to go out there and win, but you just have to adapt that style. So, yeah, I mean, look, I'd say to any aspiring young trainer or old trainer, whoever it is that wants to go into the pros, go on the road for a couple of years. Go on the road, get a journeyman, go and you learn pretty much anything that could happen has happened. I've had fighters pull off wins against the odds. I've had fighters get knocked out. I've had fighters get cut, bruised, broken jaws, busted eardrums. I've had fighters, whose elastic on their shorts has broken. In fact, it all sounds ridiculous. Fighters where the sole of their boots have started flapping off halfway through, and you basically get to cover every possible scenario if you're lucky enough and you're busy enough on the road. And you just learn the trade. You learn what to do. I mean, I'm not gonna get into specifics, because it wouldn't be right of me to point the finger at any particular trainer. But we've all seen big name trainers that are great when their fighters are winning, and all of a sudden the wheels start to come off and there's panic in the corner. They don't know. They don't know what to do, because they've only ever been used to working with winners. They get handed stellar amateurs to work with that are beating people up, and all of a sudden, as I say, once it gets hard in there, you need to know what to do when the pressure's on you as a trainer. It's not just about what's going on in there with a fighter. Obviously, ultimately, it matters about what's going on with a fighter, but if you can't handle that pressure from a trainer scenario, you've never been in that situation before, then you've got to start learning on the job as well. And that's hard to do when you're in a 12-round title fight. I mean, Gary Corcoran's world title fight, I had Jason Field in there as a cut man who works for UFC and, again, works all over the world, is absolutely superb. Obviously, again, I do the same thing. I mean, Gary got 2 terrible cuts over his right eye, terrible cut on his left eye. So I'm in the ring dealing with his left eye. Jason's leaning in from the side dealing with his right eye. And it's again, dealing with adversity. I mean, obviously, Gary ultimately lost the fight, but he didn't lose it on the cuts. We dealt with it. We've been there and seen it and done it. So I think it kind of rubs off when you're in a gym environment and you're chatting to people about, the whys and the wherefores and the pitfalls and the do's and the don'ts. It comes across if you've been there and seen it and done it. And they obviously had a bit of faith in me.
Yeah, sorry, you carry on, Scott.
No, sorry, mate. I was going to say, and what's been most satisfying for you? Obviously, you've got your first, obviously you've won a few now, but your first win as a trainer compared to your first win as the pro boxer, you had one win, obviously. What's been most satisfying for you? The difference in the journeys and.
I mean, obviously, getting in there yourself and you know, putting the gloves on and having a fight was superb. I mean, for me, the pro debut was absolutely amazing. It was a great feeling. I mean, there was a little bit of pressure on me, considering I knew everyone on the circuit and most of the trainers and promoters and whatever else. And there's always that element of, what the fuck am I doing this for? You know, if I go and get ironed out in 30 seconds, that's going to be with me for the rest of my boxing career. You know, remember when you tried to have a pro fight, you donut, you know. So that was good. I mean, even the guy that I went in with, Gavin Tate, was a former Southern Area champion. I think he'd had 26 fights. I was making my pro debut, so it was a great experience. But I think possibly because of the way round I did it, being a trainer first, I think I prefer being a trainer to being a fighter. I mean, one, you don't get punched in the face when you're training people, and yeah, it's just a different mentality, it's a different mindset, and the way the missus is just shouting that she prefers me being a trainer to a fighter.
Yeah,
I bet she does.
But yeah, it's a different mentality, it's a different mindset, and the way my mind works, I'm always sort of plotting and planning, and I almost feel as though I got more control as a trainer than I ever did as a fighter. That's probably because I wasn't very good, but that's a whole other issue.
So on the weekends, see, David's calling out Nathan Gorman.
Yeah.
Personally, I see that as clever marketing. Like, you have to do that. You've got to get your name out there. You've got to get people talking about you. I think it's very clever of him. But is that a fight you'd generally consider coming up soon?
It depends on how quickly you say it's soon.
So it wouldn't have been the day after like he wanted.
No.
Yeah, no, obviously not. I mean, look, again, I think I did an interview with Seconds Out immediately after the fight, and they asked me about Gorman. Look, from a fighter's perspective, David firmly believes that he will be the best heavyweight on the planet. I'm pretty sure if you asked him, he firmly believes that if he was in with Tyson Fury tomorrow, he'd beat him.
Yeah,
you know, he's got a winner's mindset. He's got a winning mentality, and the whole Gorman thing started probably about 6 months ago. I think it was after his second fight. I'm not sure which one of the YouTube channels it was that started asking him about Gorman and Wardley. And of course, as a fighter, you're going to say, yeah, I'll take any of those guys. You know, that's where my sights are. And it's been bit on both sides. I think Gorman made a couple of comments on social media, and David, to be honest, I mean, there's no beef between them. They don't dislike each other. Again, David's on record. I think they was both up sparring against Hughie Fury a year or two ago. For the Pulev fight, actually, they might have been sparring together. They never actually shared the ring, but they was there for sort of 3 or 4 weeks together. You know, there's no problem. They actually bumped into each other at Nathan's weigh-in at the weekend. You know, and it was all smiles all round. But look, purely from a trainer's perspective, would I back David if that fight was made tomorrow? Yes, I would. Do I want it if it was down to me tomorrow? No, I don't. Obviously, Nathan's a 19 fight pro, you know, seasoned, trained for 10, 12 rounds multiple times. And David's effectively, well, he's a 5-fight novice who's done 7 completed rounds in it across those 5 fights. So, yeah, you know, realistically, no, I don't want it right now. Would I back David if it was made? Yes. There's always that issue with taking certain fights is once you've been there and you're at that level, then you're at that level, and it's what comes after that. So, you know, look, he's a 24-year-old. I don't mean this to be disrespectful, but he's a 24-year-old kid. There's no rush, but I'm also a firm believer in if you're good enough, you're old enough. So we'll see. I mean, we're supposed to be out at the back end of April. We'll probably be an 8-rounder, maybe another 6. And then I think we're going to be looking at like area titles. So yeah, I mean, towards the end of the year, if he shows me that he can do the rounds in the gym, and he shows me that he can comfortably do the rounds in the gym, then as far as I'm concerned, the gloves are off, on then off. You know what I mean?
yeah, we just need to be sure that he can do the rounds, because that's basically what it boils down to. I mean, I've said, if you had a checkbox, you know, athleticism, you tick David. Punch selection, you tick David. Jab, you probably tick David. You know, power, you probably tick David. The unknown is the experience, and can he do the rounds? We don't know that yet. It's all right doing it in the gym, but we need 2 or 3 fights where we're training for a 10 or a 12 rounder, sparring for 10 or 12 rounds, and basically getting used to doing that distance and learning how to pace yourself and, you know, put your foot off the gas and take it off. That's where that time is vastly important. And again, I think that's where my experience comes into play. I've been there with Gary. We've been at world level, and I've also been at the bottom. I've seen fighters that are not ready to take a step up yet, either because we've been in against them, or I'm training them myself and we've took that jump too early and he's not ready to do the rounds and they're blowing out their arse after 6 rounds and they've got another 2 to go. That's not a good position to be in. And clearly, with a prospect as talented as Dave, I want to make sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed before we run any risks.
Yeah, it's a sensible way to do it. I just think, obviously, they both said in the interviews they liked each other. They didn't have any beef, so to speak.
Yeah.
Which I just thought it was just really funny. And the fact that, you know, Campbell Hatton made his debut, Dylan White got revenge, yet you go on social media and you're seeing the clips of Nathan and David having back and forth.
Yeah.
It takes something like that on a big weekend of sport to stand out. I thought it was a very clever move from him. It was funny, clever, and, you know, fair play to him.
It's that. I mean, that's probably a little area where I am a little bit out of touch, is this modern social media type stuff. You know, I mean, David's Instagram and his Snapchat and all that stuff. I mean, it literally goes absolutely bananas, like on and around fight week. You can imagine. So yeah, I mean, again, as you say, look, it's a case of keeping yourself not relevant because he's just a new pro, but you know, getting your name out there, getting people talking about you, and getting people following your career.
So is your main focus just going to be you and David for the time being then?
Yeah. To tell the truth, yeah. It's again, I mean, I'm unfortunately not in a financial situation where I can go and be a full-time trainer just yet. Although effectively I am a full-time trainer. I mean, we're in the gym every day, but I can't be there for 8 hours a day training multiple fighters. It's just that I can't afford it just yet. Excuse me. And it's a full-time job, kind of away from the gym as well. You're always sorting out sparring, you're traveling here or there, or, you know, talking to strength and conditioning and whatever else. And I'm kind of one of those trainers that wants to give the fighter every possible bit of my time that I can. Again, having been on the road and seen these boys that are more or less training themselves and, you know, turning up and just getting people to wrap their hands. The sport's brutally hard. And whilst I can't commit fully to being in the gym 8-9 hours a day, then I'd rather just train one fighter.
Yeah, well, that's commendable. You're not stretching yourself to make more money out of fighters. You're giving 100% to one person. Yeah.
I mean, look, again, I'm kind of talking myself up a little bit here, and I hope it don't come across that way, but I've been doing this job for sort of 12, 13 years now. I've never, ever been in it for the money. It was never, ever about the money. It was just because I love doing it. And clearly, you know, the money is going to be touch wood, is going to be going up rather quickly when you're working with a prospect like David Adeleye. I mean, the heavyweights get paid a little bit more than most. So yeah, clearly it's going to be a nice ride to be on. But again, it's not about the money. You know, I've done it week in, week out for journeymen that are getting paid £1,000 or something. You know, and you're getting 10% of that, and you're getting paid £100 to drive up to Bolton and back on in one day. You know, I mean, I think I drove up to Newcastle and back on a Saturday with my brother once. I mean, it was absolutely brutal. And you're doing that for £100. It's not about the money. It's something that I enjoy doing. It's a passion. It's a vocation. I absolutely love it. When I'm not in the gym, I'm looking at boxing. When I'm not looking at boxing, I'm talking about boxing or doing a podcast with you great people.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on.
It's all right.
Just sorry, while we're on heavyweights, obviously got to ask you, what do you reckon about the big one potentially coming up, Fury and AJ? What's your views and what's your prediction on that?
I lean towards Fury. Obviously, David has been in a spar with Fury. He's also been in a spar with Joshua. That wasn't too long ago, actually. We went up to Sheffield and sparred with Joshua for the Pulev fight. And if I'm honest, I had a preconceived idea of what I thought Joshua was going to be like, what he was going to be like sparring, and he was better than I thought he was going to be. Yeah. I mean, clearly, I thought he was a good fighter. You don't go and win world titles for nothing, but he's better than I thought he was, and he's definitely added layers to his game that I think you saw a little bit of in the Pulev fight, but I certainly don't think it's going to be as easy as I did maybe 2 years ago. Prior to the first Ruiz fight, I said Fury piss it. He'll box his ears off. Yeah. I don't quite think that's going to be the case now. So that gap's narrowed. I still lean towards Fury because of what we've seen of both of them. I think he is that little bit more versatile. He's that little bit more adaptable. I mean, in terms of recovery from being hurt, we've seen both of them get dropped and get up and be hurt. But
Undertaker style.
I still think Fury has got the better chin of the two. It might actually go down a little bit easier, but he certainly doesn't hold the shot for as long as Joshua does. So yeah, I mean, I think again doing the old checkbox exercise, most of the ticks are in the Fury box, but Joshua is a big man. He's very powerful, puts his punches together really well. And you know what? If he hurts Fury, I'll be very surprised if he lets him off the hook. But we'll see. I mean, I'm hoping that we'll be on the undercard. It'll be extremely good to get out there and experience that kind of show, that size, that amount of eyes on it. It'd be great to get on the undercard. It'd be great for a prospect like David. I'd be very surprised if we don't get asked to go and spar with either or both. Probably Fury, bearing in mind style. They're probably going to want David in to try and imitate Joshua a little bit. But yeah, I getting back to the original question. I told you I could talk, didn't I? Getting back to the original question, I lean towards Fury, but 60-40, 55-45, something like that. I think it's a lot closer than people think it is.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're all in agreement, like me and Scott and our friend Rob, who does it with us, but he's moving house today, that Fury wins. And we did the similar thing, went through the tick system. And like you say, it really is a just marginal kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And as I say, there's improvements that Joshua's made. He's a lot more relaxed in there. I mean, when the last spar that we did, he did 12 rounds with 3 different fighters. So I did 4 rounds with each. And obviously everyone's getting in and they're fresh. And he's previously, he always looked like he could blow at any time in terms of like gassing. But I think he's learning it, or he's finally learned how to pace himself properly. And he's a genuine 12-round fighter now. I don't think he's going to run out of steam at any point. I mean, clearly, again, being as heavily muscled as he is, if he ends up throwing 100 punches in a round, he's going to gas. But I don't see that happening. I think he's learned how to pace himself. He's learned some valuable lessons from that Ruiz fight. And he's gone away, addressed it, and come back a better fighter.
So that's the stuff that we don't see, because that was part of my prediction, to be honest. It will be the later rounds for Fury to catch him when AJ's tired. So it might change my opinion that as well now, to be honest.
Yeah, no, again, as I say, I mean, we all have our preconceived ideas, and we all sort of judge a book by its cover to a degree. And up until me going up to Sheffield at the EIS and watching the spar and being involved in the spar with Dave, I have my own preconceived idea, and he certainly showed me that I was wrong.
That's good to know. Yeah,
which I'm happy to admit. And as I say, he's a genuine 12-round fighter now for me.
It's got to be great experience for David though as well. Sparring Fury, sparring AJ so early on in his career as well.
Completely, and actually, while they're both heavyweight champion.
Yeah, when they're both in their prime.
That was
Crazy.
both heavyweight champions of the world. Obviously, he sparred Fury prior to the first Wilder fight. Then he sparred him for the second one, and then he went back and sparred him for the camp because he was going to fight in December. If you remember, he was going to fight on BT, and that got cancelled. So he sparred him when he had that world title belt round his waist, and obviously he sparred Joshua for the Pulev fight. So yeah, I mean, there's not many out there that have probably sparred both while they've both been champion. I mean, we've also, it's well documented. He sparred with David Hay when he was an amateur. We literally just got some rounds in with Chisora for this training camp. So yeah, I mean, pretty much anyone out there really, we're happy to go and spar. We possibly might be doing a few with Parker. I think he's going to be based over here for the next few weeks for the Chisora fight. So we'll get a few rounds in there and you know, judge our progress.
It's great experience.
And yeah, those sorts of spars are great. You know, you learn by being pushed, and you learn by being in with people that effectively are more experienced and more seasoned than you. I don't like to do it week in, week out because it's just too hard. But yeah, again, you use your experience and your knowledge, and you get the right sparring at the right time.
Yeah, he's serving an apprenticeship in and out the ring by the sounds of it, not just, you know, fight night, ticking the boxes off. Sounds like you're getting him to tick them off outside the ring just as much.
I think, I mean, again, I was having a conversation with someone earlier about Dave, and I think he's going to be one of those prospects that doesn't really get properly tested until he gets up to that level.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw at the weekend, I know he was in with a debut lad, and a debut lad that probably should have been a cruiserweight as well. Listen, we appreciate that guy stepping in at a late notice like that, but we saw David's power, we saw his athleticism, his movement. He's starting to set shots up properly. I mean, the left hook that he finished the fight with was, for my mind, superbly set up. He went with a right hand to the body first, clearly hurting there, and then slipped onto the other side, but threw a couple of feints in first, slipped across and dropped the left hook into the body. It was that would have been a good shot against anyone, and probably the way it was set up would have been landed against anyone as well. So yeah, he's learning away from the lights, because obviously, as I said earlier, he's had 5 fights now, and he's barely completed 7 rounds against 5 different opponents. So it could well be that, you know, he gets to 15, 16-0 without really being tested. So we've got to go and do the Joshua sparring and the Fury sparring. Yeah. Again, I know it's different, and it is different than the little gloves, the 10-ounce gloves, especially on the big men. I mean, you put their hands in the gloves and they're like mittens on them. You know, I mean, literally, I look at them regularly and think, that's just not fair. They should be wearing 16-ounce gloves, you know. So it is different on fight night, but clearly the closest thing you can get to that is high quality sparring. And we're lucky enough, obviously, being with a promoter like Frank Warren as well, that opens a lot of doors. Yeah, we're lucky enough that we can get that valuable sparring.
So what are your plans for the future? Do you think you're going to wait until the Fury Joshua fight is announced, or get one more in before?
No, I think we're going to be, there's a bill towards the end of April. I think there's one on the 24th, maybe the Cash Bentley bill. Potentially we might be on that, or there's one on the 30th as well. I can't think who's topping it now off the top of my head, but either or, I think we'll probably be on one or the other. I hope.
Okay.
So yeah, hopefully we'll be out. You know, we'll get a quick turnaround in, and then if Fury and Joshua was made sort of July time, most people are hoping that it's going to be. We'll have a few weeks break before we go and fight again. But yeah, I mean, look, for me, ideally, we'd be out another 3 or 4 times this year. Get maybe towards 10-0 by the end of the year. If we get out another 4 times this year, we'll be sitting at the end of the year 9-0. Touch wood. And then, yeah, as I say, looking at, hopefully by that time we'll be area champion, English champion, maybe at a push. And early next year, you could be looking at British title. You could be looking at Adeleye v Gorman. Maybe Gorman will be moved on by then. I don't know, but there's certainly a fair few heavyweights in and around that kind of level. I mean, obviously, Dubois is going to come back. I don't know whether he's going to look at sort of British, Commonwealth, European again before he moves on. We just don't know. So there's going to be a few names in and around us, and as you know, hopefully by the end of the year we'll be better placed to know exactly where our sights are. At the moment, as I say, it's just a case of cracking on, learning, doing what we're doing in the gym, getting a good rounds in, and just developing into being that 12-round fighter.
Sounds like a solid plan. And he's getting it everywhere, isn't he? Quality sparring.
Yeah.
4 or 5 fights in the year. You can't ask for more than that, I'd imagine.
Absolutely not. If I was going to write it down on paper, what I want, it pretty much that would be it. You know, I mean, it's one of those. Look, everyone wants quick knockouts, and that old cliche, you don't get paid for overtime. Purely from a trainer's perspective, I'd like maybe some of these fights to go into the 3rd or 4th round, just so I can sit there at, you know, when Dave's on the stall, you spot what you spot. It's all right watching, you know, YouTube footage and whatever else, but you see different things on the night when you're sitting there and watching it in 3D, you know. And it'd be nice to be able to sit down and chat to him and build that relationship in the ring on the night. Because again, talking about the difference between doing it in sparring and doing it under the lights is completely different. And we've seen, I'll tell you, I mean, a good example would have been Anthony Yard in Russia for the first time in his career, pretty much, well, literally for the first time in his career, we got pushed. Now, that relationship doesn't develop unless you're under fire, unless you're, when Anthony's sitting there and he's saying, what do I do? Or, you know, what's happening? What do you want me to go and do? What do you want me to go and try? It's hard to recreate that when you're knocking people over. So, as I say, ideally, I'd like him to go 3 or 4 rounds, 4 or 5 rounds. If he's doing a scheduled 10-rounder and it takes him 6 or 7 rounds to get rid of some guy, that's great as far as I'm concerned, because it'll only help our relationship and our understanding of each other, and my understanding of what kind of instruction he's able to go out there and carry out. Again, because doing it in the gym, you know, I can say, look, slip the jab in front. It's different on fight night. And until you've been in that situation on fight night, you really ultimately are not totally sure. You've got a good idea based on what you've done in sparring. You're not totally sure. So in the ideal world, I'd like a few extra rounds, but you know what? I mean, if he keeps knocking them out in 90 seconds, then so be it.
Well, hopefully you'll be able to get the rounds in for him.
Yeah.
But you never know. He carries serious power.
That, as I said, that's the issue. I think it's going to be until he gets to that higher level, we're not going to get tested. You know, you can't have everything. I'd much rather have a fighter that's blowing people away than one that has to go the distance every time. So, you know, it's me being ultimately picky, but yeah, it's going to be a good ride.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
well, I can't wait to carry on watching it. I think he's been brilliant so far. He's very entertaining, and he's switched on.
Yeah, he is. He's a bright kid. Obviously, he's got a degree away from the sport. Went and got an education, done it the right way around. He's got something to fall back on. Not that he's going to need it. He's going to have 200 million in the bank by the end of the career. But yeah, he's just done it the right way. And that, again, to me, shows the right kind of mentality. You know, listen, anything's possible in this game. You know, you can break your hand. You can be in a car accident. Anything's possible. So, you know, having the sort of foresight to go out and look after himself away from the sport, like that in itself takes pressure off you. It's not, oh my God, if this don't work out, what am I going to do? This guy's got a business degree, you know, he's a smart kid. And that only helps, again, when you're trying to formulate game plans and you're trying to talk about the important side of this, not just about getting in there and punching someone in the face. It helps when you've got someone who's as intelligent as he is.
Hence why he knows how to market himself very well then.
Yeah, because that's nothing to do with me.
Right, well, thank you very much for coming on. We'll let you enjoy the rest of your evening.
You're welcome.
It's made me want to go out and get a seconds license, this.
If you do, just go on the road, get a couple of journeymen, mate. You'll learn.
Yeah, I think it'd be brilliant.
It'd be a hell of a journey.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to Carl Greaves about it, actually. Now, Carl, he's at that level now with David Adeleye, and he's been there. He's been in big fights. He's been in world title fights. He's had multiple British champions. You know what? Again, Cole cut his teeth, like going out, taking kids on the road. He's been there. He's seen it. He's done it. He's seen every possible scenario and every situation, you know, and that's how you learn. And that's how you look at these fighters and you learn what to do.
Yeah.
Did you hear us say that?
Yeah.
Got to put the kids in the bath. And me as well, but we won't talk about that.
My wife's the boss as well, don't worry.
Yeah.
Right, well, thank you very much for coming on. Hopefully, we can get David on at some point as well.
Yeah,
Get
I'll
you both on, maybe.
Yeah. I don't see why not.
Right, wicked. Well, enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you very much for giving us your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Cheers, mate.
Right,
Thank you.
wicked. Cheers.
Sorry, but come on.